Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Wellness Wednesday session on coping with triggers, where we're going to explore goal setting, problem solving, and radical acceptance, or how to address issues preventing you from building the life you want. My name is Laura Vardy, and I'm the Regional Addictions Prevention Consultant with NL Health Services in the Central Zone of the province. All right, so today we're going to be looking at addressing prompting events in this cycle of emotions, or what we might call triggers. And triggers are simply maybe people, places, things, so certain situations, things that could be internal to yourself or external to yourself that can lead to us feeling some difficult, strong emotions that can be difficult to cope with. So we're going to focus on coping through the use of problem solving, goal setting, and finally radical acceptance in this session. But first I want to talk a little bit more about this cycle or this model of emotions. So basically what we see here is that there will be a triggering situation or a prompting event. So for example, someone looks at you a certain way. They give you what you then interpret as a dirty look. And that interpretation leads to a physical response in our body, right? So maybe we start to feel hot, maybe we start to feel our fist clench. Maybe we start to experience some other problems, increased heart rate, sweating, things like that in response to our interpretation of this trigger. So it's not really the trigger or the prompting event so much as how we interpret it, how we perceive it, that leads to our physical response and then our urge to act, which is basically how we initially, in the heat of the moment, or how we immediately want to respond or react in that situation. So we might have this urge to ask them what their problem is, to confront them. Maybe we're feeling very upset. We don't necessarily act on our action urge or this urge to act. Sometimes we're able to kind of stop and think about it and say, well, no, that wouldn't really be appropriate or the best way to react. And instead we might take a different action. Maybe we ignore them. Maybe we, walk on. Maybe we say hello or give them a smile. And then we have the after effects, right? So the after effects, what happens afterwards? And then so the cycle goes on with another prompting event, and we can go around in this cycle, and it can certainly lead us to struggle with a variety of different emotions if we're not really sure how to cope. So today we're going to focus on, as I said, the prompting event or the triggers portion of the cycle. Now certainly look out for other Wellness Wednesday sessions and recordings that address the other aspects of this cycle here. So just to give a brief overview of the coping strategies we're going to be looking at, I'm sure everyone is at least somewhat familiar with problem solving, goal setting, probably have done some of that. Maybe you find that you're quite effective at these things, or maybe you feel like you can improve your problem solving skills or set better goals. And these are skills, they are things to be learned. We're not natural born problem solvers and goal setters. It's actually something I do a lot of work with children in schools now from a very young age, that primary, elementary school, going in, teaching problem solving skills amongst other skills, because they are very important skills for life. Radical acceptance, you may be less familiar with. It's a DBT or dialectical behavior therapy skill, and it can be a challenging one to master, but with practice, anything is possible. So we're going to get into what that is and how you can do that. Basically, we want to use problem solving to try to find a solution to something that is within our control, and that's very important. And that's going to come up multiple times in this session. So sometimes we can solve problems when things are within our controls, in our control. Goal setting could also be a component of problem solving. Once we identify a solution or potential solution, we can maybe set up a SMART goal. I'm going to go into what that is exactly, and go about solving the problem that way. It can also be a standalone skill that we might want to use. And then we have radical acceptance, and this is what a skill that can be used when things cannot be changed or fixed, or when we cannot control something. Unfortunately, our action urge and sometimes the way we react in situations when we don't have that control is we still try to fix them and change them. So just as an example, maybe we have someone in our life who is using substances, and we really want them to stop. We want them to get help. We think it's a problem. We're concerned about them. We express this to them, and they say no, they don't have a problem, or no, they don't want the help. They can help themselves, and so on and so on. And it can become very stressful for someone to experience this with their loved one. And that's where radical acceptance can hopefully be some help here to help reduce our own suffering, because we can continue to suffer by going at that person and saying, you need help, you need help, you need help. And they continue to say, no, leave me alone. So it's not about giving up hope on them. It's not about being supportive. It's not about saying, okay, well, no, I guess they don't need help. They're right, I'm wrong. No, it's about reducing our feelings of powerlessness, reducing our own suffering by focusing on what is within our control and accepting what is not. So that's something we'll definitely talk about in more detail as we go through this session. So when we look at triggers or prompting events, we first want to decide, is this within my control or is it out of my control? And when we look at the things that are within our control, things that we can change, these are our boundaries, right? It may not be easy, but we can choose what we accept and do not accept when it comes to the behavior of others and how others treat us. We can change our thoughts and our actions. Again, it may not be easy. It might take some learning and skill building, but it can be done. We can change the goals we set. We have control over that. What we give our energy to, how we speak to ourselves, our self-talk, right? We can say things to ourselves that are positive and encouraging, or we can beat ourselves up and be very critical, which of course is detrimental to our mental health. And we can control how we handle challenges or how we cope. The things that are outside of our control that we often try to control or change are the opinions of others, what other people think of us, how others take care of themselves, what happens around us, the past, right? So we can't change things that have happened in the past, but sometimes we focus so much on, if only we had, done this instead of that, which can really negatively impact our mental health if we get stuck in those thoughts. Same with the future. We can become overly anxious if we worry and think so much about the future. And maybe as I talk about these things, I'm sure we can all think of examples, at least one example of a time when we tried to change or control something that is actually out of our control, right? Because we may so desperately want to change these things. But really, we need to recognize when we simply cannot. And often we'll try problem solving and different things to try to make these changes, but not have success with this. So let's talk a bit more about problem solving and how that relates to our mental health. So sometimes struggling with mental health issues can make it challenging to engage in problem solving. Sometimes our thoughts are racing or our mind is foggy. It can be difficult to focus, to concentrate, and think clearly, which are some skills we really need for problem solving, right? We need to be able to think about different solutions and what may or may not work. But also by not engaging in problem solving, this can really lead to the development or worsening of mental health issues. So when we procrastinate, when we try to ignore problems, things in our life that we can deal with, things can really pile up on us, right? And become overwhelming. And so, for example, if people are always asking you to borrow money or different things like that, and you say yes, but really you don't want to, but you just don't want them to be upset with you, that's a common problem for a lot of us, right? And when we do that and we constantly say yes to folks, it causes stress for us, right? It may even lead to financial problems for us, resentment, mental health problems. When it is within our control, we are able to change that situation, and we are able to say, no, I cannot loan you money right now. It may not be easy. You may have to develop some assertive communication skills, but it is possible. We may not have had the opportunity also to learn how to engage in effective problem solving. Just like I said, it's a skill to learn. So we're going to go through what that skill looks like, how you can effectively use problem solving. And again, I'll emphasize that to be successful with problem solving, we really need to focus on solving problems that are within our control. And some of the benefits of problem solving include being able to identify which stressors trigger your painful emotions, like sadness or anger, building confidence to handle problems that you face, having a systematic approach on how to deal with life's problems, having a toolbox of strategies to solve the problems you face, increased confidence in finding creative solutions, and knowing how to identify which barriers will impede your progress. Also, problem solving can help us know how to manage emotions when they arise and reduce that avoidance or procrastination, not taking action to solve problems when really that would be what's most helpful to us. It also gives us the ability to accept life problems that can't be solved and the ability to make effective decisions. It helps us to develop patience because not all problems have a quick fix, right? And so here is an emotion regulation handout from Dialectical Behavior Therapy that shows the steps in problem solving. So typically there are 7 steps that are quite similar to this, no matter which approach you're taking. So this is just one example of a handout. And as I go through the steps, I'll ask you to think about a problem that you may want to solve. And maybe not something that's too huge, like too big, but maybe a small problem that might be somewhat easily solved if you go through these steps. So first, we really want to figure out and describe the problem situation. And sometimes people too quickly move on from this step without really specifying or identifying what the real problem is. So for example, if I had a problem getting up in the morning, I was sleeping in and I was late for work. You might say, okay, well, that's the problem there. But actually, you need to kind of take a step back and think about it a little bit more. So why am I sleeping in and being late for work? Is it because I'm choosing to stay up late and read a book or watch a TV show? Is it because I'm forgetting to set my alarm? Is it because I'm depressed and having trouble getting out of bed? Is it because I hate going to my job, so I'm struggling to get out of bed and get there on time? So these are different problems, really, when you look at it. So we need to be specific. Let's say the problem is tiredness, a lack of sleep, staying up too late to watch TV or read a book. That's an easy fix. And so step 2 kind of goes with this as well, where we're checking all the facts to be sure we have the right problem situation. Step 3 then is when we identify our goal in solving the problem. And this is where goal setting can come in handy. So what needs to happen or change for you to feel okay? You want to keep it simple and choose something that can actually happen. So something that's realistic for you to be able to do. So I think it's realistic for me to be able to arrive at work on time in the morning. That's what I want. That's what's important. I don't want to be late for work. So then what needs to happen for me to show up at work on time? So step 4 is where you brainstorm lots of solutions. The more, the better. You want to get at least 5 to 7 different solutions if you can. They don't all have to be great. It's basically writing down anything that comes to your mind that could be a possible solution. So it could be, I could say, well, the solution is to go to bed 1 hour earlier. The solution is to not read in the evening or watch TV in the evening. The solution is I can prepare for work the next day by packing my lunch the night before. I can get a shower in the nighttime instead of the morning. I can lay out my clothes for the next day. Maybe I need to set my alarm for earlier in the morning. Maybe I need to cut out parts of my morning routine. I can skip breakfast, not stop at Tim Hortons on the way to work for coffee, things like that. So then you want to, in step 5, is really go through each of the solutions and choose 1 or 2 that best fits with your goal and is likely to work. You might want to do pros and cons to compare the different solutions if you're having trouble narrowing it down. Or like I said, you can choose 2 different solutions. So I don't like the idea maybe of having to skip breakfast or not stop at Tim Hortons. For me, that's not going to be realistic. Giving up reading at bedtime or watching TV is not always going to be realistic every single night. But maybe, and I don't really want to get a shower and pick out my clothes and pack my lunch the night before, but maybe something I can do is I can plan and prepare to go to bed at a specific time. So maybe 10 p.m. instead of midnight, and making sure that I have a reminder set around this time so I know when to put down the book or turn off the TV and give myself time ready to go to bed. This way I should get more sleep, be less tired in the morning, wake up on time, get to work on time, hopefully, right? So you choose the solution. Step 6 is putting that solution into action. And then step 7 is evaluating the results of your solution. Did it work? Great, keep doing it. Did it not work? Okay, going back to step 5 and maybe choosing a new solution to try, or doing some more brainstorming to come up with alternatives. So that is basically how problem solving works. So next I'm going to show a short video on the benefits of setting goals. And then we're going to talk more about goal setting.
Are you a person who feels like you're drifting through life like a rudderless ship without a destination? Are you a person who works so hard but doesn't seem to really get anywhere worthwhile? You feel unfulfilled, demotivated, perhaps lost your way a little. Perhaps you've been so busy that you haven't spent any time to focus on yourself, think about, or plan goals for your future. If you can honestly answer yes to these questions, don't worry, it's never too late to start goal setting. What is a goal? Well, a goal is an objective or aim for achievement, the desired result. Think about your life journey. Would you set out on a holiday abroad with no real idea of your destination? Probably not. Everyone deserves happiness. So start now to set your goals for your life. Setting goals the right way can bring many benefits for you. Goal setting gives you a focus for your future. How helps you concentrate your energy on things that make you happy and help you reach your goal. Gives you increased confidence and belief in yourself as a human being. Gives you a personal sense of achievement. Empowers you to have a choice about your life. Helps you find your passion in life again. And motivates you to enjoy your future. You deserve it. The process of setting goals helps you to find your direction in life. By knowing precisely what you want to achieve, you know where you have to concentrate your effort and valuable energy. By planning your goals, you will also have made a commitment to yourself to be successful. By writing your goals down, they become a reality. You must also tell someone else that you trust what your goals are and visualize yourself achieving them on a daily basis. Goal setting is a powerful process for thinking about your ideal future and for motivating yourself to turn your vision into a reality. You are not alone in this process, and there are lots of resources to help you to set your goals effectively.
Okay, so that video tells us a bit about goal setting. Now I just want to talk about some of the pitfalls that we can experience when we're trying to set goals, things that happen to a lot of us, right? So maybe the goals don't align with what matters to us. Basically, sometimes we might give into the external pressure of others to make changes, right? So someone really wants us to quit smoking, or someone really wants us to lose weight, different things like that. It could be anything really. And we aren't really sure ourselves, or maybe we're not really committed to it, but we feel we need to do that to please the other person. So unfortunately, we don't tend to be so successful with achieving our goals when they are the goals of other people, right? So when we are setting goals for things that we're not yet ready to address. And on the slide, it mentions pre-contemplation, contemplation stage of change. And basically, what that's referring to is when we're changing behaviors, there is a stage of change model that kind of shows how we go through the different stages. Pre-contemplation is when we're not thinking about change. We don't see a need to change, or maybe the benefits of engaging in a particular behavior outweigh the negative consequences of it, right? So it can be the person who is smoking who says, you know what, it's just too hard to think about quitting smoking. I hate the cravings, the withdrawal. I don't feel like I'll be successful. I don't feel prepared. And I kind of still enjoy smoking. So I'm okay to continue with this, right? Things like that. Contemplation would be where the person is maybe considering change, but they haven't committed to it. They haven't made up their mind. They're maybe still weighing the pros and cons of changing a behavior. So really, until we've made that decision that, yes, you know, I want to make this change, I want to achieve this goal for myself, then we're not likely to be very successful with achieving that goal. Sometimes we set goals that are just too big or too vague to be attainable, right? So think of maybe a New Year's resolution. I want to be healthier. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean you're going to change your, reduce your substance use or quit smoking? Does it mean you're going to join a gym or exercise more often? Does it mean you're going to change what you eat, and how so exactly? So we want to make very, very specific goals, and I'll talk more about that in just a moment. Sometimes there's a fear of failure that can get in the way, right? We might have some of that negative internal self-talk that says like, I can't do this, this is too hard, right? And then that kind of sabotages us. Similarly, people might not be used to success. They might be used to feeling that they've failed things. So that in a way can be a fear that can lead to self-sabotage and not achieving our goals. So how can we set goals that we're likely to be successful with? We can set SMART goals. So SMART goals refer to goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time limited. So what that means exactly is we want to set goals that we want to set something specific, as I had said just a minute ago, right? So instead of my goal is to get healthy, it might be my goal is to live a healthier life by eating at least one fruit or vegetable every day. So adding one fruit or vegetable to my meals or my snacks every single day. So that would be quite specific. It's measurable, right? So measurable being how do you measure your success or know you've achieved your goal. So that's where time limited could come in as well. So it might be every day this week, right? So a very short-term goal to kind of set us up for that initial bit of success. Or it might be for a month and then we extend it from there or add to it from there. So we want to make it something measurable. We want to be able to measure whether or not we're reaching our goals. And if not, then we need to change our goals. Achievable and realistic. So is it something that I can actually achieve, right? Is it within my budget? Am I motivated to eat a piece of fruit or a vegetable every single day? Or should I start off with maybe 3 days a week? So it's kind of knowing yourself, right? And sometimes it takes some trial and error, and it's important not to be discouraged if you set up a goal that may actually not be achievable or realistic for you, and you find that out a few days or a few weeks in. It's never too late to modify your goal, change it up, and make it something that is going to be more achievable or realistic. And as I said, time limited is pretty straightforward. It's when you want to set an end date on your goal. And it can be very helpful to start off with something that's very short term rather than years or a year down the road, right? So for someone who's maybe wanting to meet a weight loss goal of 100 pounds, that can be quite overwhelming and take some time. So they might want to start off smaller with, I want to lose 5 pounds in the next month, or I want, something like that could be, it is specific, it is measurable, it could be achievable depending on the person and the efforts that they take. So part of it also means figuring out if that is your goal, what are you doing to lose that weight, right? What is your plan? So there's a lot of planning involved with setting goals and achieving our goals. Some other helpful tips, it can be helpful to state a goal as a positive statement, so something that you will do instead of won't. So instead of, I will never smoke again, maybe saying, I will quit smoking. So what I will do, focusing on what you will do instead of what you won't do. It just frames it in a more positive way, and that way you're focused on what you're wanting to do, which is you're taking action. Being precise, so setting goals, putting in dates, times, amounts so that you can measure your achievement, of course. So I will quit smoking on Monday, this coming Monday, for example. Or as I said, I will lose 5 pounds by the end of this month. Or it could be, I will go for a walk 3 days a week for 30 minutes each day. And I will do this at 6 p.m. in the evening. It also helps to prepare for the barriers that may come up, right? So what if you plan to walk outside, and what about rainy or snowy weather? What if the weather if you don't want to walk outside in certain weather and that weather comes up? What is your backup plan? Are you going to do something else inside? Are you going to change the day of the week when you go for your walk? Are you going to go to a gym instead? So these type of things we want to consider and prepare for up front. And we want to set priorities. So you might have several goals, right? To live a healthier lifestyle can involve changes to substance use, what we eat, activity level, sleep. So it's maybe focusing on one small goal or one priority area to begin with. So it might be something that could be a bit easier, a bit more achievable, or something that's very important for you to start with. So it is really up to you. And you want to write down your goals. You want to tell at least somebody about it to make you accountable. It's easier then to stick with something when you know that it's written down or somebody else knows that you're working on this. As I said, we want to keep operational goals small, small and achievable, so that you can see the progress towards it more easily and not become overwhelmed or feel like you're not really getting anywhere with something like that, which it can also be rewarding, right? You can say, instead of waiting until you lose 100 pounds to reward yourself with a new wardrobe, you might say, when I drop down one clothing size, I will get new clothing in that size, right? So that's a bit of a smaller goal, something that's going to happen in the nearer future and can help you, I guess, boost your motivation to continue working on that long-term goal that you have. We also want to set performance goals, not outcome goals. Really, you want to make sure you have control over the goals you set, that it's stuff that's within your control. So just thinking about, if your goal is to win your softball tournament this summer, you can't really control whether your team wins or loses. There's too many factors that are outside of your control. But what you can control is how you perform. You can control, for the most part, how often you practice, what you practice, the effort you put into your games, and that sort of thing. Of course, unless something unexpected comes up, like injury. So it's, being prepared for that and knowing about those possibilities. Setting realistic goals, as I've already said, to make sure that they are achievable. So making sure that you have the skills and the knowledge to achieve a particular goal, for example. So again, if, going back to the sports example, if you wanted to make make it to a certain competition or competitive team, I'm just thinking this now because I have a young child who's in different sports and they'll have tryouts for performance and competitive teams and whatnot. And so, you can't really control whether or not you make that team, but you can set goals around, preparing for that, the practice you're going to put into that, the things you need to do to give yourself the best possibility of making that team. You want to possibly stack your goals at times. So research will show that you're 2 to 3 times more likely to stick to your goals if you make a specific plan for when, where, and how you will perform the behavior. So for example, saying during the next week, I will partake in at least 20 minutes of vigorous exercise. And you could even be more specific and say 20 minutes of cardio activity or exercise or running on, every single day of the week at 6 p.m. And I'm going to do this in the cardio room at the YMCA gym. So very specific, right? You can also set up your environment for success. So creating cues and reminders in your environment. If you want to drink more water, there's an app you can get for free that reminds you when to drink water, and you can track your water intake. You can also make sure you have a full jug of water in your fridge waiting at all times, or a tray of frozen ice, things that will entice you and remind you to drink your water. It can be like, I know if I buy a full watermelon to save money instead of the pieces that are cut up, if I just go and stick that watermelon in the fridge or just leave it, it's probably going to go bad before I eat it. So then I have to figure out, well, what's realistic? If I want to be eating more fruit, I want to eat this watermelon, then that gets a bit easier if I chop it up right away and put it in a container and it's very accessible. Or if I buy the stuff that's already cut up, even if it costs more money, sometimes if you're able to do that, sometimes you might need to do something like that in order to have more success with achieving your goals. It can be removing things from your environment that can interfere with or distract from your goal, right? So it's, maybe if you don't want to eat so much junk food, it's not purchasing the chips, the chocolate bars, the cookies, keeping that out of your home if you can, or keeping it out of your workplace or your car or whatever it is that you need to do. And then finally, we can create ways to measure our goals, right? And I also want to mention habit stacking when talking about stacking our goals. So this would include using, I guess, a current habit and then adding in a new habit either before or after that. So for example, if I get up every morning and I have a cup of coffee, and I want to start meditating, my goal can be, after I brew my morning coffee, I will meditate for 1 minute. So pairing the two together. Or maybe I always watch the news at 5 o'clock. So maybe it's when I go home and turn the news on at 5 o'clock, I will take that time to also use my treadmill while I'm watching TV. All right. So when it comes to radical acceptance, this is when we need to recognize that sometimes problems cannot be solved or addressed. Sometimes we're not the ones who are in control and can change things, especially when it relates to other people's thoughts and actions. We may want to change those things. We may want people to change, and we may feel that we are the ones who need to change them, especially if they're our children, if they're our family members, if they're our partners. But unfortunately, we cannot change other people, no matter how much we might beg, plead, give ultimatums. Those things don't really lead to successful long-term behavior change and positive outcomes. So what do we do? What can we do? Well, we can choose how we want to cope or how we want to respond, right? We can reject reality, not face the reality, and keep pushing for the change and not having it happen, so becoming increasingly frustrated, leading to suffering. Or we can say, you know what, I can't change this, so I'm going to have to find a way to cope with it or find a different way to respond to the situation. So this is essentially where radical acceptance can come in. And I'm sure we can all think of at least one example when we've had difficulty accepting the reality of a situation as it is. I'm going to show a short video now on what radical acceptance is, what that DBT skill looks like, and how we can use it.
Radical acceptance is the skill for when your life or the world is not exactly how you want it to be, which means that for most of us, this is the skill for always. Radical acceptance means accepting this instance or this situation exactly as it is in this moment, accepting that this moment couldn't be any other way, given the billions and billions of things that have happened to lead up to it. Now, before we go any further, let's make something very clear. Radical acceptance does not mean we have to approve of or like our life in this moment or the world exactly as it is. Some of us are living in hell right now and want desperately with our whole being to be out. Radical acceptance is not about getting rid of that wanting. Radical acceptance is about turning our minds from rejecting reality. When we tell ourselves how life shouldn't be this way, it usually only creates more suffering for us. Instead, radical acceptance is about accepting reality, recognizing that everything is caused, whether we like the causes or not, and understanding that changing reality requires accepting it first. Practicing radical acceptance then requires first noticing that we are fighting reality. The word should is often a good indicator of non-acceptance, or the unhelpful attitude of why me. Once we're aware that we're rejecting reality, you can take a step back and observe what's going on in your mind and body. You can observe what rejecting reality feels like. Now make a choice to work on accepting reality. Turn your mind towards accepting. Take a deep breath. Turn your palms up into a willing posture so that your hands are communicating to your brain that you're working on being willing. Remind yourself that everything has a cause, even situations that elicit great pain and suffering. Remind yourself that life can be worth living even with these painful moments. Remind yourself that it's okay, actually more than okay, to have sadness about how things currently are for you or for the world. It will take time, maybe a long time, to get to a place where practicing radical acceptance leads to greater peace and calm. Keep practicing over time. You will find that if you stop running away from reality, you will become more effective and therefore more likely to reach your goals, enact positive changes, and make the next moments ones that are easier to accept.
Okay, so that's radical acceptance in a nutshell. I just want to read from this slide now. So radical acceptance is when you accept things the way they are without resistance. Instead of wishing things were different or focusing on how they should be, radical means all the way, completely and totally. It is accepting in your mind, your heart, and your body. It's when you stop fighting reality and let go of bitterness. Radical acceptance rests on letting go of the illusion of control and a willingness to notice and accept things as they are right now without judging. So not an easy task for most of us, right? And it's certainly something, as was said in the video, that requires a lot of practice and patience in practicing that. And it doesn't mean that a reality that you're accepting is okay, that you like it, that you've just given up all hope completely, or you're giving in, or accepting failure. It's just accepting what is and what we cannot change. So it can be more easily done when we start with smaller, easier parts of our reality first. So it might be getting stuck in a traffic jam, right? Or there's road construction, more likely. It can be very frustrating and we can be upset and we can say, well, why did I have to drive this way? Or why couldn't I have come through here half an hour earlier? Why did I leave so late? Or say to the person in the car with you, this is your fault, you left late. And we can get worked up and angry and frustrated. Or we can say, okay, so the reality is we are stuck in this road construction. We do not know how long it will be. There is nothing for us to do right now besides sit here and wait because we don't want to go home. There is no other route. So we just have to wait and be patient. How can we cope with that? Do we need to take some deep breaths? Do we want to put on some music? Is there a game that we can play in the car? A book I can read, different things to kind of distract and help cope and get through the situation instead of allowing, all these negative thoughts and feelings to just take over. And I also want to encourage you to be careful that the reality you're accepting is indeed reality and not false limitations. So for example, someone who is struggling with an anxiety disorder, someone who has a lot of anxiety might say, okay, well, you know, I'm too anxious to go out in a crowd. So I need to radically accept that I can never be in a large crowd, or I can never go on an airplane or a bus or a concert and so on and so on. But these are self-imposed limitations. Yes, they may not feel they're able and ready to do those things, but they can, it is within their control. These things can be changed. They can learn skills and coping strategies, things that can help them, if they want, to be able to encounter these situations with less anxiety. So rather than avoiding them, which is often people's go-to when something is feared, when we're anxious about it or nervous about it, we will avoid it. But that just contributes to ongoing and sometimes increased anxiety. So, you know, these are not necessarily the facts. It may feel like the reality for the person. It may be their current reality, but at the same time, it is something within their control that can be changed, if that makes any sense. So what needs to be accepted? Well, the facts of reality as is. The past, we can't change the past, and we may not be able to control things that can happen or things that are happening in the present. We all encounter obstacles, so we need to focus on what we can control. And everything has a cause, even situations that cause pain. So sometimes we might think, why me? You know, why am I divorced? Why did this relationship end? Why did I lose my job? And those can be some really difficult situations to deal with that can lead to all kinds of negative thinking and emotions. And you know, that happens to all of us at times as humans, right? It's really easy to go and get stuck in that negative place and ask, why me? And this shouldn't have happened, and this isn't fair. But everything does have a cause, even things like this, like that may not seem fair or right, that we may not be deserving of. It's not about that. It just is. And also, life can be worth living even with painful moments. So why accept reality? You know, why would you even want to learn to do this? Because pain in life cannot be avoided, but we can avoid suffering by accepting the pain. So you may have heard a saying, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. So that's what I think of here, right? Whether it's physical or emotional pain, that's a natural part of our lives, unfortunately. But suffering, we kind of cause our own suffering in a way when we take that pain and we hold on to it, and maybe we do things that intensify it with our continuous negative thinking, our lack of acceptance of the reality, things that we can't control. So what can we control? We can choose how we cope, right? We can feel that pain, but then we can find ways to cope and let go and accept and move on. And when we refuse to accept reality, you know, this can of course keep us stuck in unhappiness, as I said, or suffering. It can lead to bitterness, anger, sadness, shame, and other painful emotions, and just holding on to those emotions longer than we need to. So we're hurting ourselves and possibly others as well if we aren't able to accept reality. Acceptance, yes, it may lead to some sadness, some initial discomfort, you're feeling pain, but peace usually follows. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And remember always that radical acceptance is not approval, compassion, love, passivity, or resistance to change. It doesn't mean we have to accept a situation. It doesn't mean we have to like a situation just because we're accepting it. Of course, this can be very difficult to accept painful realities, and it's common to feel unbearable sadness and anger at a person or group or that caused a painful event, right? Rage at the injustice of the world, overwhelming shame about who you are or guilt about your own behavior. These are normal human emotions, but it's when we get stuck, when we can't cope, we can't let go of these emotions, we can't accept what happened to cause us to feel this way, or we can't accept that maybe what happened is not something that we can change. So we need to do our best to accept the pain. We're not trying to hold on to it or intensify it and suffer. And we're not trying to push it away and not feel anything, even though we may have that urge to do so, right? It's just letting it be, experiencing it, and then allowing it to eventually pass. Turning the mind is another concept that's about choosing to accept. It's about coming to a fork in the road, and you can either turn towards acceptance of the reality or rejecting the reality. So you do have that choice, even in situations that are painful and you don't have much control over the outcome. You can choose to accept the reality or to reject the reality. So it can be helpful to picture that diagram, right? Like coming to a fork in the road, two pathways, and visualize and tell yourself which pathway you are going to take. So how else do you practice? How do you practice this radical acceptance, really? So you want to first observe that when you're not accepting reality. So this tends to be when we're angry, we're bitter, we're annoyed, maybe we're trying to avoid emotions, saying things like, why me? I can't stand this. It shouldn't be this way. This isn't right. This isn't fair. So when we notice ourselves having these thoughts or having these feelings, that's a good sign that we are rejecting and trying to fight against the reality and making the situation more difficult for ourselves. So this is when you can make that inner commitment to accept reality as it is, choosing that pathway that goes towards acceptance of reality rather than rejection. And then you're probably going to need to do it over and over and over again, especially initially, especially with more challenging situations, which is why I suggest practicing with something that might be, you might not want to accept, but might be a little easier to accept, right? Like being stuck in traffic, or maybe it's a rainy, your beach day happens to be a rainy day, right? Bad weather, something we can all relate to here. So keep reminding yourself, no, I'm trying to accept this, right? I'm trying to move away from the bitterness and the anger and those why me thoughts, or that shouldn't be this way, and trying to think of it differently and thinking about that fork in the road. And over time, it should get easier, right? It does get easier the more you practice. But it can be very hard at first and require a lot of patience and a huge commitment to this. You want to develop a plan for catching yourself in the future when you drift out of acceptance, right? So again, oh, there I am asking why me again, or, using shoulds. Okay, so I don't want to do that. I am going to accept this reality. I am going to try to cope with this situation. So some more everyday radical acceptance situations that you can start with. Like I said, accepting that it's raining on the day you plan to visit the beach, accepting you're halfway to your destination and you forgot something, right? Accepting that you're speaking to someone who talks over you, accepting when someone cuts in line at the grocery store, accepting that someone next to you is chewing loudly, or that someone cut you off in traffic, or that someone is talking during a movie, accepting when you drop important items. So sometimes these things happen to all of us and they can be quite frustrating. And you may want to try to change them, right? So maybe someone who's chewing loudly, or talking during a movie, and you can certainly bring it to their attention. You can ask them to stop, but you can't control what they're actually going to do. Um, this makes me think of addressing bullying behaviors with individuals. So often I hear about school-aged children and youth who are being bullied, and there are things we talk about, right? Reporting it, talking to, reporting it to like a teacher or school official, their parents. Maybe if they feel safe, asking the person to stop, calling them names or whatever it is they may be doing, walking away if you can, just trying to ignore the person, throwing them off by maybe, one young person told me that someone called them fat, and they said, "Thank you for that," and smiled and walked away, and it really threw the person off, and they didn't say that to them again. But really, we can't control another person's behavior. We can control our own. So we can control how, I tell youth, you can control how you respond to bullying, right? You can choose to walk away versus punch that person in the face or say something nasty back to them. It may be very difficult because you may want to attack them back. And sometimes people feel that works, although I do not encourage that. We can only control our own behaviors. We cannot control how someone else is going to respond. Will the bullying continue, even if this person does everything within their power to try to stop it? Very possibly, unfortunately, right? Even if their parent is contacting the school or going, to the school board or the MHA, and, unfortunately, there are sometimes things that are out of our control. So then it becomes about also teaching children and folks how they can cope with the emotions they're experiencing as a result, right? And I know that's hard to hear because, just listening to that, you might be saying, well, this is ridiculous. No one should be bullying anyone else. Bullying should be stopped. And I believe that there are adults, there are youth who make every effort to try to address bullying, to stop bullying behavior. Can it always be stopped? It doesn't seem to be the case, unfortunately. So here are some other tips on actually practicing radical acceptance step by step. And it kind of overlaps a bit with what I had just said. This is just another handout we're showing. So observing that you are questioning or fighting reality, right? So those emotions, those thoughts that I had previously described. Reminding yourself that the unpleasant reality is just as it is and cannot be changed. So this is what happened. My child was bullied. I lost my job. I am now divorced. My relationship ended. And then reminding yourself that there are causes for the reality. It may not seem right or fair, but there is something that led up to this happening. When I think about individuals with substance use disorders, for example, and maybe an example being, you hear about an armed robbery or a home invasion in the news, and people get really upset. They say, well, that person, they're a drug addict and they're a criminal and they should be locked up forever, the key thrown away or shot. And, it's very easy to be upset and to have those judgments and those thoughts. But when we look back, if we were to know that individual and their situation, I'm not saying that their behavior is acceptable, but we can kind of understand people's behavior oftentimes when we look at if we're able to look at different factors. So from my experience, this individual is not if they are living with a substance use disorder, they become desperate. Folks can become desperate to the point where, criminal activity may be what they resort to doing in order to get the money, get the substance, the drugs that they really feel that they need, right? And addiction and substance use disorder is so complex. But maybe this person was abused as a child or experienced some form of trauma. Trauma is very common in the lives of individuals who are living with substance use disorders. Again, it doesn't mean it's okay to rob people or there should be no negative consequences, but this is maybe why, what led to this behavior, right? So our different experiences shape us and shape how things happen in life. Then we want to practice accepting with our whole self, our mind, body, and spirit. And what this means is refining ways to cope, essentially. Ways to cope with our thoughts, with our bodily sensations, spiritual ways to cope. It could include using self-talk. So telling ourselves, I don't like this, but it is outside of my control. Everything will be okay. I will find a way to cope with this. I can do this. This is not the end of the world. So saying things like that, writing it down as well. Consider relaxation exercises, deep breathing, mindfulness. And then there's other strategies called half smiling and willing hands as well. Prayer, going to a place that helps bring you acceptance or peace, using imagery. And so these are so many different skills. We don't have time in this session to teach these individual skills, but there are ones that you can learn through other Wellness Wednesday sessions, our other group sessions and virtual sessions we offer on Bridge the Gap, through counseling, through self-help materials. There's all kinds of great videos on YouTube to teach deep breathing and mindfulness. So there's lots of places where we can learn different coping skills. We can also practice opposite action. So that's another DBT skill. And it basically means acting in a way that is opposite of how you want to react, right? So, someone comes at you, they call you a nasty name, you might want to call them that name back, you might want to hit them out of anger. But if you are able to stop and take a breath or a few breaths, walk away, you probably realize, hopefully, that that's not the best reaction to have. And so the opposite to anger is remaining calm, being peaceful. It might be walking away, right, to diffuse the situation. Just like the opposite of being scared or anxious about a situation is facing it, is going right in there. Now, I'm not saying that this is easy. Sometimes we require extra support from friends, family, professionals in order to get to a place where we can use these coping skills and change maybe how we change the way we respond to certain emotions and situations, right? But it is possible to always change our behaviors and react with opposite action. So again, if this is something you want to try on your own, it's maybe starting with something that's a bit smaller and a bit easier for you to do. So maybe you are, again, you're stuck in traffic and you might want to curse and yell and beep, but maybe you're able to restrain yourself from reacting that way and say, you know what, I'm going to put on some music now that makes me feel relaxed and happy, and take some deep breaths and calm myself down. That might be something that you already are able to do. So that would be considered practicing opposite action. And with regards to radical acceptance, you can also list all the behaviors. So think of or write down all the behaviors you would do if you were to accept the facts of the situation, the reality as it is. Then you act as if you have already accepted the facts, even if maybe you're not really convinced. So doing the behaviors, acting in the way as if you accepted the reality of a situation. So for example, you might have this urge to repeatedly tell a loved one that they need to get treatment, they need to get help for their mental health or their substance use concerns. So instead, it's holding back on that, because at this point, you've told them multiple times, they know how you feel, they know what you think they should do, they aren't ready to hear it, they don't want to hear it. It's not changing them, it's not changing their behavior. So instead, you show them support, and I know this, that action, you're trying to help and be supportive, but it's maybe listening to them and trying to understand their perspective and maybe why they don't need or want, feel they need or want treatment at this time, and maybe asking and trying to understand what it is they do need, right? So asking questions, I don't understand, can you please, help me understand what you're thinking, or why you're not interested in talking to a counselor, or what is it you need from me, how can I support you? So it's kind of forcing yourself to act in a way that's different from what you might initially want to, or what you've previously done. So then we also have Cope Ahead, which is about considering how we might be prepared to help us reduce stress. So I guess planning ahead, planning to cope with a difficult situation, a stressful situation that might come up. We know we might be experiencing a trigger. It might be when you go to your in-laws' house, you always have a fight with your mother-in-law. You always get into an argument, you get frustrated. So preparing yourself for that, right? Whether it's going for a walk, making sure that you've had enough rest, that you're not too tired, you're not hungry, or in this place where you're already vulnerable to negative emotions. You want to kind of get yourself in that good mood, be prepared for what could happen, but also thinking about, well, what can I do? What would I say? Would I walk away? Can I leave? What's the plan if this does happen? So it's really like rehearsing and preparing for things in the future. So it's not about denying this will never happen. It's not about expecting your mother-in-law to behave differently, because we have no control over that. So it's really about, how will I behave differently? How will I respond differently to her? How can I cope with this? Accepting her as she is, and this is the situation. We can also attend to our body sensations as we think about what we need to accept, right? So we might notice changes in our breathing, in our heart rate. We might become hot or flushed, depending on the emotion and the thoughts. So recognizing those sensations and things like deep breathing can be really a simple and effective way to change some of those bodily sensations. Just as an example, allow for disappointment, sadness, and grief to arise within you. It may not feel good, but sometimes it's normal, and sometimes we really need to allow ourselves to feel those painful, difficult emotions. Acknowledge that life can be worth living even when there is pain. And sometimes we might need to do a pros and cons if we find ourselves resisting practicing acceptance, right? So again, going back to the reasons why this might be helpful, or what could be the consequences of not radically accepting a situation. All right, so that brings us towards the end of our session. I'd like you all to, I thank you for attending, and maybe it can be helpful to think about now, what are you taking away from today's session? What's maybe something that stood out for you, something that maybe could be new learning, something that you can set a goal around, right? Is there some problem solving skills that you need to use? Is there a specific goal you want to set for yourself for your own behavior change? Or do you want to practice radical acceptance? Is there a situation that you can try to radically accept? Or when things come up, you know, smaller things that are less upsetting, you know, let me try to practice some radical acceptance with that and go from there. And at the end of all of our Wellness Wednesday sessions, we like to share some of our provincial and Canadian resources. So first I will mention Bridge the Gap. So that is a website that is available for free for residents within our province. There are youth resources, and there are also adult resources for those who are 18 and older. So you can certainly look up Bridge the Gap. There are service listings of various mental health and addiction services across our province. There are helplines, crisis phone numbers, different apps that you can download. There are, you know, wellness self-assessments that you can do. You can find information on, you know, what is an anxiety disorder, or what does problem gambling look like? Various things like that. Within Bridge the Gap, you can find some virtual, as I mentioned, virtual programs and apps. So MindWell or MindWell is one of those things that you can download for free. It teaches, there's a daily Take 5 mindfulness lesson, so 5 minutes a day to learn how to be more mindful, which is a great tool for improved mental health. There are live classes Monday through Friday and recordings on various topics. So it's all about mindfulness and also managing stress. Then we have the TAO resources, therapy assisted online, where there are some modules, things that can be done through Bridge the Gap that are self-help, and things that where you can sign up to get a coaching call from a therapist. So there is a problem-solving model. There is a module. There is a course on acceptance and so on. There's also online short programs that you can do on your own. There is the Strongest Families Institute, which you can look up or find their information on Bridge the Gap. They have that adult ICANN anxiety and depression program. They also have programs for children, youth, families. There's a parenting program for parents of children as young as 3 years old who are experiencing behavioral difficulties. So things from not listening, bedwetting, ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder. So you can certainly give them a call or go to their website to learn more, and you can actually refer yourself for free to their programs. You get telephone coaching calls, you get one-on-one support or group support, and it's based out of the Maritimes, I believe. It is Canadian, and we've heard some really great feedback on the Strongest Families Institute programs. We also have LifeWise. This is our provincial peer support organization. So they have, in the St. John's area, they have some in-person groups. The best thing to do is visit their Facebook page because there are up-to-date schedules on their various groups, services. So they do have virtual groups available across the province that will address different mental health topics. And these are led by peers. So people who have lived experience with mental health and substance use concerns and are trained peer supporters themselves. So it's people who've had maybe similar experiences and providing support to one another. There's also individual support that can be provided by calling their warm line. That's available, I believe, 10 a.m. Until midnight, 7 days a week. And so there's a toll-free number you can call from anywhere in the province, speak with someone who's located within the province. This is for adults only, and get that peer support. So maybe you're going through a stressful time. Maybe you're feeling lonely and just want to talk with someone. So it's all about that support for your mental health and wellness, and for those struggling with or living with substance use concerns as well. And finally, I want to mention Doorways. So most of our mental health and addictions clinics across the province offer a Doorways program. It's a free walk-in or call-in counseling service. I do encourage people to call ahead on the day that they want to speak with a counselor, just to make sure that there's going to be availability. And of course, different locations have different days. Some of the larger centers, I know, like St. John's, where I am in Grand Falls, Windsor, Gander, offer Doorways Monday through Friday. The hours do differ by location. So again, a good reason to call ahead. Or if you aren't able to go to Doorways Clinic in person, maybe because of where you live, or maybe you prefer a telephone session, that can be scheduled as well. So to find out the Doorways locations near you, you can look on the Bridge the Gap website, NL Health Services website. You can also call 811 and they will give you that information. And calling your local mental health and addictions office as well works. All right, so that is all for today's session. Thank you again, everyone who joined. Take care.